Well, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about some things dealing with getting an undermount sink mounted, some things that happen in ongoing with this one, and it may be relevant to what you face, maybe not. So let's roll title and get with it. All right, you see right in front of us, we have a little small work surface. It's an island, all right? It's not one of the big ones with, say, a dishwasher and a sink and maybe a microwave, a drawer microwave in there and a little back spot there for the kids to eat breakfast on so we can have our little morning get-togethers before we turn around and break and clean everything up, put our cereal bowls in a dishwasher and that sort of thing, wipe everything down. Now, a big slab like that has a sinkhole in it, they're very easy to mount. Because what we'll do is we have just a hole in it, a lot of meat around the rest of the countertop. We'll take it, we'll flip that over, get it on the job site, locate that, run a little bead of silicone around the sink itself where it's good to go. If we don't have a template, we've already measured out and we've got our sinkhole cut. So we just drop it in there, get it about right, make sure we feel it, get the right perimeter, and then we take our little bolts, our sink bolts, which usually have like a little piece of Swiss cheese head on it, something with holes. Put a little epoxy and put them in various locations, glue them down, put the clips on. It's easy to do. It's the bottom side up. We can get to our nuts, our easy stuff, and then we take our guys that are with us and we flip the whole slab over the top, put it down into place, and we're golden. And we can take that sink out if we need to in the future. If the plumber needs to take it out for some reason. If we drop something in it, we bang and chip the porcelain on the sink, the enamel comes off. If we ruin the copper, if we drop something and put a hole in our copper sink, or whatever we have, we can replace that sink without tearing the countertops apart. Now over here we have a little different situation. As you can see enough, I don't have the full counter in here, but you get an idea. It's it's over 10 feet. It's not a huge, but it's over 10 feet. You can't get that much slab to make the countertop out of, so we are joined right here in the middle, here and over here. And that makes a pretty good countertop. It hides that joint rather than having a big one, right? Instead of a big 8-foot or 6-foot or 4-foot or 3-foot, whatever we might have, rather than having a big seam, we have just a real small one right there at the sink. And that's nice, but there's not much meat there, right? So taking something long that would maybe want a bow in the middle, it's just very difficult to be able to do the same thing that we would have done with, say, a big kind of rectangular square. We have just a very long strip, so it's very difficult to do. So rather than use the clips as designed and provided to go with the template that was provided, they didn't have the holes in the countertop for using the clip because they never intended to use the clip. Now you can, because it's been done many times, it's cheap, it's fast, it's easy. We don't have the tool time of drilling our holes for our blind fasteners. We don't even have the time it takes to mix up the epoxy and then to glue our little bolts in there for our clips. And we don't have to then fight going up underneath between that fairly small space between the sink and the cabinet to fight up where we can't really look good from underneath the bottom to get our tool up there to tighten them down anyway. So it's just easier to drop that sink down, skip all of that process, mix up some epoxy, run it around the top of the sink, push it up into place, scab a 2x4, maybe with a little post on the bottom, scab it up there to hold it into place, run some screws in through the walls and call it good. When that epoxy dries, that's not coming off. Forever it ain't coming off. Which means if in the future I wanted to drop this sink, because maybe, you know, the equipment I have up here, like the meat grinder and the all that bit and the mixers and that kind of stuff, they're pretty heavy. I need a big seat for it. What if I drop that 12-pound head or whatever it is, pure stainless steel into that sink? I might poke a hole in it, might damage it, might want to change it. Maybe the next homeowner might want to cut this out and put one of those farmhouse sinks in where we come out here, cut it down, just cut the front of the cabinet out. They could do that without necessarily having to replace every square foot of countertop up here in this kitchen. We won't be able to do that if we don't use our clips. If they epoxy that sink to the bottom, that's just stuck from there on out. There's no way to get them out without destroying both. Now you might say, well, Dale, you have a nice large radius designer type sink that's unusual shape. It's not just a rectangular cutout anyway. You may not be able to match that if you wanted to take it out either. No, but I might be able to take a 4-inch saw and cut out a rectangle and put in one of those top mount sinks that have the nice waterfall on the side and the baby bottle washer, the glass washers and that sort of thing. And for that, I just need a square hole. And most of those that I've seen actually have a spot on the sink itself for the faucet. So I could conceivably cut that hole out if I can get the sink out. Cut that hole out, put another sink in there, whether it be the farmhouse or one of the new rectangular square ones. I wanted to be able to do that. Didn't want to seem to do that because, again, it's a lot harder. I can't, they can't, the installers can't take it and do the big slab, flip it over, mount it, and then put it back in there because it has to be joined right here. So I understand that. I understand that's the next easiest way. There's no machining, the drilling, and locating those holes there's no waiting for that glue to dry. We just stick it up underneath there. So this is what I did. Now, as you can see, the wood represents the edge of the cabinet. And as you can see, we have more than enough room to get our clips in. Now, I wanted to use the clips because that was the manufacturer's recommendation, and we can certainly get it in there. Now, even like this, we see we got plenty of room in the back, along the side here. A little tight on the front, but the thing with this type of hole, it just needed to be located using the template that was provided me from the manufacturer. That comes with a template. So we used a template to give to the people that cut the hole so that they would know where the anchors go. And remember, over here, this is what they look like. If you haven't seen one of these, it's just a blind fastener. You have to drill a hole using the template provided, using the template given to drill that hole, and it doesn't go all the way through the slab because that's why it's blind. It's just a pocket. But you need that template to locate those screws. All right, go back over here. So we have enough room, even with a ledge, with an edge here, that flange, we still have enough room with that little hole to use these particular ones. And I will grant you that it's an awfully big sink for a 36-inch sink base. But here's the deal. That sink was bought knowing it would fit that sink base. The problem is, it's just a little bit more trouble to put in like that. So let's go show you. First, let's talk about why it didn't go in that way with those clips, and then I'll tell you how it did go in, showing you some video. Let's get to it. Well, here's my attempt to ledger this particular sink because apparently it's large enough that they really can't get the clips in. So what I've done to make sure I didn't have sharp objects coming through toward the dishwasher where I rip my hand up, or anyone in the future, just put bolts through there, some T-nuts or furniture nuts if you want to call them, built a little ledger. It's set under here more than a 16 gauge of stainless is. We've got the same thing on this side. It looks like it's a little bit lower, but I can raise that. Same basic concept. Had to put a stuffer in there to keep it from collapsing, and we come in from the drawer side because I can take both that drawer out and the dishwasher to get that ledger down and drop that sink without destroying the rock above it. I'm just going to silicone a little lightly around the rim. As you saw in the preceding video clip, you saw a 2x4. Now this is the rest of one after I've stripped some off. But the 2x4, this is the 1.5" dimension. So this would represent the tall side of the ledger. You saw how we put that in there. We had 3 T-nuts, 1/4-20s coming into it from each side so that I didn't have the screws where the plan was, as explained to me, they were just going to put this old gray piece of scrap 2x4, run that up against the bottom lip of the sink to hold it in place, run a vertical piece, run some screws to it. Now, true, we could have put a cross member like this and up underneath it, taken our braces and gone up under it. Or if you prefer from the bottom side, sink would go on this side. This would go right up against the bottom of it as the ledger, and then we would post it from below in each side, again running screws into and toward that dishwasher. I didn't want to do that. You saw the ledgers. But when I went to put the sink in, it wouldn't fit because there is plenty of room for those flipping clips to clip the flipping sink. All right, so what I end up having to do is cut some more pieces like this, and we had to add them to the top of the ledger. Epoxied along the line, and I think there's 5 or 7 or so screws that go into the top of that. And because we had the full 2x4 height here, that whole 3.5 inches, our actual holes where our T-nuts were right below it. So we got that epoxied into place, then screwed on top of that to give a little bit extra width because we needed the flange to engage it. And there's plenty of room on each end of that sink. That's how we did it. Now, let's go to another camera set and talk about this. Hey, appreciate you watching. Do me a favor if you will, subscribe to the channel, either the YouTube or the Rumble channel, which this appears in. And if you can, check the notification bell or settings to make sure that you get notified when new videos are posted. Appreciate it. So, we've just talked about the ledger. You've seen that picture of how it was built. I've also told you that we had to extend the ledger out by another whatever 3/4 of an inch that was, whatever that dimension worked. But when I set the first one that's on the dishwasher side, bolting through, I could pull the dishwasher to get to those 3/4 20s. But I didn't want to. So I set it so it's got enough play between that and the final location of the countertop itself so that I could put the sink in from the bottom and slide it into place. Then, because I can remove this drawer out of the way, I can easily get into this cabinet on this side to put the other ledger in after I have the sink in place. So, how we did it was we did in fact take running a bead of silicone around it. That will act both as a glue or a way to hold it, a vibration, rough surface type of adhesive. It has pretty good grip actually, silicone does. I don't think I would depend on it by itself. But we put that around there, slid it in there at a little bit of angle, rising in position, and then took our third hand. This is the little one, and what it allowed me to do is to get that into place, raise it up just enough to hold it while we put the other ledger in and bolted it down. Then at that point in time, it could rest on the ledgers on those edges that we had and still let that silicone dry. This takes all the weight off of it. It's also what we used in the previous video to hold the sink into place where we could get our visual idea when we were talking about if you're remodeling a sink, be aware that you can get one too deep, perhaps, depending on who built your house and where your hole is over here for your drain. You have to coordinate that. So we did a good video on that for remodelers and do-it-yourselfers to keep them from having to run into the fact they bought a sink, it's out of date, they can't take it back, and they're stuck with maybe a $300, $400, $500 sink they can't use because their plumbing is not right. Unless, of course, they rip the cabinets out, mess with the plumbing, and that can get unpleasant. So that's how we put that in. We set it up, slid it in. The ledgers themselves will come off. I have enough of a gap if I need to. I can take a saw or a knife and cut that bead of silicone out and drop that sink. Good news and bad news. I found a bunch of footage I thought I deleted. I didn't know how I deleted it. It's just on a different camera. That camera has died now and we're out of battery, so we have to use this one. As you can see, that's our ledger that we had to build out with that extra filler to get better engagement. And on this side, we see that it's closer. And that's because the hole that they cut for the sink was not center of the space in the cabinet. It's not centered in the space. It's more this way. So when I fixed the sink in its proper position for the countertop, I actually have less support on that side, but there's enough there with that extension to it. Again, how do we put it in? We had enough room, a little gap between the ledger and the countertop, slid it in with the silicone, put it up into place, came over here, took our drawer out. Drawer was already out right here so that we could open our door, get our little hand in here to get to those 1/4 20 heads, put that ledger into place, and then we let it dry, came back and sealed around the top. Now,